And once again, my name is Ben Kaplan. I'm the CEO of Top Global. This is Media Training Masterclass. In Top Global, we have 12 different agencies. PR Hacker is one of them, our sort of data-driven viral marketing PR agency, one of the fastest growing PR agencies in the world. And this is a training either to, A, train yourself. You gotta make a great impression. You gotta tell your brand story. You gotta get some investors. You gotta reposition your company. Or B, train other people to do it too, right? Maybe you're at an agency, maybe you're at an PR agency, maybe you have clients, maybe you're, the head of marketing and you got to get your CEO ready to do this, whatever it is. So either for yourself or someone else, that's the purpose of today. And here is our agenda. So we're going to do a very fast introduction to the media and the journalist point of view so we can understand how they approach stories. 3, we're going to go into mastering interview techniques. We're going to do a lot of how to answer certain types of questions, what's in your toolbox, how is TV different than print, and we're going to start this concept of a value-centric approach to interacting with the media, which is an approach based on how do you deliver value, not just how you make yourself look good, because the little secret is when you deliver value, you actually make yourself look great. Then we're going to do analysis of a couple sample interviews to like really kind of, I find it's like seeing a great example and a bad example really codifies this. And then a couple of things with handling tough or surprising questions. After this hour together, you're going to be like, no matter what question I get, I got this, no problem. And then we'll have some like kind of the closing insights. Okay, so that's the agenda. This is just about me. And this will be the only slide about me, I promise, in this deck. Just my background. So I actually come at this from a few different ways. One, I've trained hundreds of people to do this, hundreds of companies, our clients' media training. But I've actually been a guest on the media a lot myself. So I've appeared on 5,000 TV and radio shows. That goes from, Oprah Winfrey Show to Talk of the Nation on NPR to the BBC in the UK. I've been a past regular contributor to actually all 3 of these, CNN, CNBC, and Fox News. In a prior career, I was an author, a newspaper columnist, and an expert on personal finance and education. So I talk a lot about those kind of subjects. Now I talk much more about marketing, virality, and sales. And then finally, on the print side, I was a nationally syndicated columnist. I used to write a column called Scholars and Dollars that was based in the Oregonian, which is Portland's daily newspaper. I don't know if anyone here is from Oregon. Mention it in the chat. I always like Oregonians. And I was a radio correspondent for one of the top metro stations in the U.S., KMOX, which is based in St. Louis. So I'm going to get at this from like the media training perspective, the PR agency perspective, but also the guest expert perspective. And so as we go through, the first thing to realize, and we're going to do this quickly, is just why is media training an important skill? And there's a few elements that I think people overlook. I think one, you can learn to speak in a way that people will take notice. So yes, we're trying to master a skill to like do a media interview, but it actually helps you beyond that. 2, what it trains you to do is actually clearly and concisely define your key messages. So you're gonna take something that's long and you're gonna be like, here's how we compress that into a soundbite, right? So we're gonna do all of that. It's super helpful for that. 3, it actually trains you to gracefully handle answers to difficult questions. And it gives you a tremendous amount of confidence because you have a methodology to handle something that could be very difficult. Maybe someone's, challenging your premise. Maybe someone, doesn't believe what you do. Maybe someone you get in an interview and doesn't like your product. What do you do in all those situations? 4, it actually helps you to better control the media interview. When you can understand it and you understand the dynamics of what's going on, you can shape it in some ways. We're going to show you how you shape the interview, even if you're responding to questions and you don't have direct control. We're showing you how you can take control. 5, this is the big one for a lot of particularly C-suite executives in controversial areas. You are less likely to get misquoted. You can actually, because you have greater control, you can make sure you're quoted the right way. And finally, 6, you can actually get more returns on the time investment. So if you're going to take time from your busy schedule, or your client is, or your CEO is, that's an investment. And so there's some things we can do to generate more returns, and actually more repeat interviews that generate returns. We're going to talk about that. So the bottom line of this whole kind of first part is this. This is a useful skill for media interviews. It's a useful skill for branding your company. But actually, it's a useful skill for just being a communicator, just being a business communicator. This will make you better in board meetings. This will make you better when you have to rally the troops to support your point of view. This will make you better when you have a client or a customer that pushes back on something. This will make you better when you have to write marketing copy and express yourself. So this is a fantastic skill, and that's why I'm very, very excited when I talk about media training. So brings us to the 5 Bs, the 5 Bs of successful media interviews. And these are 5 things that I think allow you to really distinguish yourself, really make an impact, and it actually gives you a little bit more leeway to talk about what you want to talk about. Okay, so let's go over these. First one is be likable, the first B. And this is your first goal, and I don't care how serious the subject is. I don't care if it's it's a somber tone. I mean, you'll be tone appropriate, but your first job is actually just to be likable, because people don't watch or listen to people they don't like. And if the journalist likes you, even better. If your audience likes you, that's great. So the number one thing that instantly makes you likable is your smile, right? Is your smile. And so we actually coach our clients that you smile in print interviews and radio interviews too when they're done over the phone, right? And no one is seeing your smile, because just going from like I'm talking like this to like I'm talking like this, it changes. It just brings everything up. You can hear it in my voice, right? Just my voice changes. I'm trying to smile so much, right? So your first goal, be likable. That's the first thing, but it's not enough. Second is be believable. So the phrase we like to use is you've got to be believed to be heard. And so what that means is you're quickly connecting, if it's personal experience or business or career experience or other experience, to help establish your expertise. You're able to talk in a confident, credible way. And many, many times when we see this in crisis communications, we do a lot of that work. What is a good message and not necessarily a bad messenger doesn't pass the believability test, and suddenly you're skeptical of everything being said. So if you're asked a question, even if you don't know what the answer, like sometimes our clients will get asked like, do you happen to know what the statistic is on the number and percent of people who blah, 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 blah? They don't know that. Well, they've got to be able to answer that question. We're going to talk about a specific strategy for that so that you can be believable even when you don't know. Right? So we'll talk about that. But the second thing is you've got to establish credibility. Someone I love who does this, John Chambers, former CEO and chairman and founder of Intel, will often like mention a credential he has before he answers the question, but he does it in kind of a folksy, nice way, and he adds a lot to his believability. Number 3, be passionate. So being passionate, whatever your topic is important, not only because people like people, hence point number 1 about who are passionate, but 2, it gives you more room, more ability to promote. So what your passion allows you to do is, what is it about your product or your brand or your service that you love so much that you would like shout it out from the rooftops? I'm going to give you an example later on from T-Mobile's CEO doing this, so you can kind of see what this is like. But the idea is that you're allowed to promote things. You're allowed to do it if it comes to a place of like, you just can't help talking about it. It's amazing. You're excited. Everyone needs to know how awesome your solution is. That's okay. But if suddenly you're like, no, I'm being sold to, I'm selling, I'm trying to convince you, I'm trying to trick you, then there's no room for that. So passion fills in the gap, right? Passion fills in the gap from, I'm just trying to sell you something, to like, I'm just shouting this from the rooftops because I love it so much. And there's a huge difference between the two. So be passionate. Number 4, be helpful. So this is at the core of what I believe is the value-centric approach, which is seek to first add value to the audience, then promote your goals. So it's you first, not me first, right? I might have a goal to promote my product or my service or my brand, but I do that by being helpful first, by giving you value, you insight, you tips, you advice. And if I do it well, I connect it to my product and brand, right? So if I have this product feature over here, I'm going to give advice and be helpful over here so that someone gets value. They can never buy my product, and that's okay. They'll get value. But actually, if we connect it to it, the path of least resistance will be to check out my product. But you got to earn the right to do that. So 4th B is be helpful. And then finally, be memorable. Be memorable. So there's so much news There's so many interviews. If you've been to like a conference or a webinar series, or, like this, they all blend together. So how can you do something that stands out from the crowd? What is in your toolbox for this is anecdotes and stories. So we will often coach our clients that you come in and you don't just have like this point. You're prepared with a story, an anecdote, example from your personal life, from your business life, from your career, whatever the topic is that anchors that home. Because we're all consumers of stories. We're built that way. There's actually a lot of studies and in sort of psychology and anthropology and sociology about why stories resonate with us, because we're kind of hardwired and built since evolutionary times to process those. So stories help memorability, and that's our goal. Our goal is in a great media interview is not just that the audience understands us, or even just that the audience understands us and thinks we're good. The goal is that the audience understands us, thinks we're good, and actually could tell someone else in their company, in their community, in their family, in their friend network, almost as well as we could tell it ourselves. So it's a higher bar, right? Not just that they get it, can they get it in such a way that they can spread it? And that's at the heart of virality, and that's why you have to be memorable. So just a quick recap here. Be likable, be believable, be passionate, be helpful, be memorable. And if you do that, you're well on your way to truly being a media master. So brings us to second kind of section. That's kind of section one, introduction to all of this. Section two is about understanding the journalist's points of view. Because when you can understand what they go through on a daily basis, you can help deliver what they need, which makes you more valuable and also makes you a better interview. So we're going to talk about the daily life of a journalist. We're talking about a little bit about rapport and creating headlines, sound bites, and turning journalists into advocates. So let me give you a sense of the daily life of a journalist. So number one, there's a huge number of inbound inquiries. Many journalists I talk to, it's 500 to 1,000 emails a day, right? I don't know how many you get. Probably don't get that many. And they're all people that like want stuff from you, right? So one, they're just going to be deluged with a lot of pitches. Realize that. Number two, journalists, and this is when I was a working journalist, was like this, I'm doing rapid coordination of production and content. So they've got a lot of logistics to work out, right? If they're a TV journalist, they've got maybe like kind of like a morning meeting when they're kind of going over what's happening during the day. They've got, if they're on air, they're getting kind of briefings and notes, and they're asking questions of their producer. But there's a lot of like scheduling and work. So not only is there a lot of inbound, there's like a lot of logistics to the job because it's all time sensitive delivery of information and content. And then three, there's regular repetition of high stress and high stakes. So when you're a journalist, and particularly like a high-level journalist or a national journalist or a prominent journalist, you're doing this again and again and again. There's a lot of stress. Usually you're in it because in part because you somewhat thrive on the stress of the deadlines, but there's a lot of high stakes. So that's just a normal thing that you deal with as a journalist. So what does that all mean? That means that our job is to make life easier for journalists by giving them what they need in the format they need it. That is how we pitch journalists. That's what we do at PR Hacker if we're going to pitch a story. But it's also how we deliver the interview. Maybe it's an off-air interview and how we impart information. Maybe it's an on-air interview. We're also trying to make their life easier and how we prep them for that interview and then deliver the interview. So all of us that want more media coverage and better coverage and more on message for what we want to talk about, the first thing you got to do is you don't think me first again. You think you first for the journalist, and you give them what they need in the format they need it. And I, as a journalist, former journalist, would super appreciate that, right? When I'm on deadline and I need to post something quick and someone does it in such a way that makes it easy for me, fantastic. One, I'm going to use it. And two, I'm going to go back, I'm going to remember that and go back to that person again because I know when I need to count on someone, I can count on them. So the corollary is this also gives us the ability to steer the message in the direction we choose. So if we make life easier for journalists, give things in the format they need it, then we can steer the message how we want, which serves our goal too, and we both win. So brings us to section number 3. And before I go into this is going to be probably the meatiest, note-taking-ist section out there. I'm going to give you a lot of very specific sort of tactics, strategies, tips, action steps. Jackson, let me pause there. What do the questions look like? How are we doing so far? We're just getting warmed up. But how do things look in the chat? And is there anything I can help clarify?
In terms of questions, yeah, we do have a few. I think that one of the ones that's interesting is sort of asking a question about how best to conduct media training for like a newly virtual world, right? When you're having to train, potentially executives who are going to be giving interviews via Zoom, are there special considerations for that? Are there considerations for both how you conduct the training, but also how you instruct them to conduct interviews when that's
Yes.
the reality we're living in?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, we've been loving the media trainings via Zoom. I mean, oftentimes, of course, it doesn't replace, being in a room with someone and being there, but we actually love it because it kind of, people are more aware of sort of like how they look, their body language. It's done over a medium like video where you can see everyone and you can kind of understand. So we like it actually because it's in a format that sort of fits what they're going to actually have to do. I'm going to go over some strategies later for how to do Zoom interviews. And how to do, or Skype interviews or remote interviews. We're going to talk about that. I think here are a couple major differences for how we've changed the training. One, we've turned everyone into their own tech and lighting and makeup person, right? And we talked about when you need to do that and when you don't. So one, everyone needs to know the basics. I'm going to give you some of those basics today, just like how you, like right now, I've got a lighting source here and a lighting source here behind me. I'm actually traveling at the moment. Just locally, but still at a hotel. So I've got a background and I didn't do the whole room, but how did I kind of do this set? We're going to talk about some of those kind of things. But the other point I want to say is that it is it's like the golden age of doing media right now. Why is that? You can do a media interview now on like a national station or international, show from your own home without having to go there. And that just never happened before. And they don't even care if your lighting is great, right? They just, like, everyone kind of understands it's the pandemic. So what's actually amazing is, and why this I think is even more important, one, from a PR perspective for pitching and getting these interviews, particularly if it's broadcast. And two, actually really embracing it now is that before you had to get like, if it was like a CEO, like they were busy, you had to get like a day when they can go to New York and they're going to do this tour. And you only had that, that one day. And if there was like breaking news, like war broke out that day, then they're going to get preempted. And you had all this to worry about, particularly if you're a PR person, and you had to make it all fit on that day because that was the only day you had. Now everyone's at home. You're doing this remotely and you can be on CNN or CNBC or Fox News or any of the top channels from home, no problem. So if anything, those of you who are trainers, this has made our job more important, easier, but also you got to take advantage of that moment now. So I'll get to the Zoom specific tips in a second. Let me talk about mastering interview techniques. No, Jackson, did you have another comment?
Just one more for you to consider, and we may not have the time to get into this in depth. I know you mentioned we're going to touch on it, but I have a couple of related questions, really asking about how to get the media to interact with you in this environment, how to reach out to them, how to secure interviews, potentially even how to get the media to a press event at a time like this. Some of this might fall a little bit outside of the scope of what we're doing today, and for some of those questions, I'd actually recommend you check out our YouTube channel where we have a lot more content. But if we do have the opportunity to touch on securing interviews in the current media environment, I that would be helpful to a number of our attendees as well.
Okay, sure. Well, one, I'm going to answer that quickly right now. And two, Jackson, if you can post the link to our YouTube channel, there's actually a webinar there I'd recommend. Like, one, subscribe to the channel. You're going to get a lot, if this content's useful, you're going to get a lot of useful stuff if you subscribe. So one, subscribe. And two, there's something actually, a webinar we did called The New Rules of PR. That was a lot based on new rules for what's happening now. So I think that's going to be super useful. But let me give you a quick answer to that, and then we'll go back into the techniques. So it is actually a great time to pitch things for the media. Why? Because media wants things that are timely. And there's lots of timely stuff happening that impacts all of our lives, whether it's impacting our health, the economy, our lifestyle, kids going back to school and education, how we eat and exercise. Like, everything's changed. And as a result, everything's kind of fair game, number one. Number two, a great thing, there's a new order because no one's an expert on the pandemic yet, really. I mean, maybe there's a few healthcare experts, you know, in sort of how viruses spread, but it's all new. So it's a new setting, a playing field of thought leaders. And actually, one more webinar you should watch on the YouTube channel reminds me is how to become a thought leader during crisis times. So there's a whole new set of thought leaders. And then finally, if you can provide valuable insight and content that other people don't have, you're valuable. You can get on anything, anytime. So what we actually do for a ton for our clients, and we even do this for ourselves, is we'll use data. We'll create data, whether it's a survey or from a focus group or from analysis of Google Trends or sentiment analysis on social media or mass media listening or whatever our method is. We'll create data that can hit what's timely and going on now. And because we're the only people that have that data, or our clients are the only ones that have the data, they instantly become valuable. So one thing you can do right now, high degree of uncertainty, tumult, chaos, things happening every day, anything that we can do like data to give a little bit more certainty, a little bit more insight, that makes you valuable. If you have valuable information, the media wants to feature you. That's the short answer. Long answer, we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but check out those webinars. Okay, so mastering interview techniques. Get out paper and pen if you still do that, or get on your keyboard right now. I'm going to give you a lot of specifics. So first of all, let's understand the 4 types of interview answers. There's many answers you can give, whatever the question. I mean, we're talking B to C questions, B to B questions, personal questions, you name it. But I would argue they tend to fall in 4 types. What are the 4 types? First answer you can give is you can give a data point. So you're providing a fact, a statistic, or another noteworthy tidbit that informs or enlightens. So one, you can answer with some kind of bit of data. And I don't mean data in just how we talked about, like it had to be like a survey result. It's just like a fact, an insight, a data point. Second answer you can give is you can give an analysis. So that means interpreting the facts, not just giving the fact, and explain the why behind the news or story. Okay, so I can give a data point or I can give an analysis. Third, you can give a prediction. So you can go and say, okay, here's a piece of data. Here's what this data means. Then you can actually say, here's what we expect to happen in the future. I'm going to extrapolate and make a prediction. That's the third thing you can do. Fourth, you can do an anecdote. It's the fourth thing. You can provide a story that brings a particular point to life in an interesting, memorable way. So I would argue that your answer is going to be a combination of these. You're going to give a data point, maybe do an analysis of that. You're going to make a prediction, or you're going to do an anecdote or story. And these tend to fall in certain patterns where they work well together. So what patterns work? You see a lot of, here's a data point, and then here's an anecdote. Those kind of work well. Like you make a data point, you make an anecdote. And in fact, depending on the format, we might reverse those, right? Like hard news station, data point, then anecdote. It's morning breakfast TV. Let's go anecdote and then data point, right? We'll kind of soften it up. So those two go together. What else do you see? You see an analysis and you see a prediction, right? Say like, oh, here's what's going on with social distancing and COVID. Here's what we expect to happen. That was something that we've done a lot for one of our agencies, Top Data, which is a market research agency. We've been going on TV all over across the US and all over across the world, actually making predictions for what we think is going to happen with COVID infection rates based on the social distancing we see from cell phone data. So in that case, I'm doing a ton of those interviews. We might do like data point from cell phone data, analysis, what does that mean? Prediction. Let's extrapolate forward. You know, how many cases is it going up or down for Arizona in 3 weeks? We can do that. So my point is that no matter what question you get, if you think in these terms and you pair them up, it changes how you prepare, right? So you're saying like, oh, I should think about having a story that illustrates any bullet point or talking point I want to make. Oh, maybe I should think about how the analysis we've done might be reflected in the future. Oh, I should look at not just what the news is, but the why it is in a way that we can explain it very clearly. Oh, maybe it shouldn't just be my subjective point of view. It should be a data point. They bring some objectivity or bring some value that others don't have. Okay, so those are the 4 answer types. Now, given that we have these 4 answer types, let's talk about how to direct and drive the interview. These answer types are sort of our toolkit, but we can deploy them in different ways to start taking more control of the interview. So One of the first ways you can do this, take more control of the interview, is ask the reporter about their intended angle for the story. When you're first talking, so maybe that's like, you're doing, before you're doing like a phone interview or a Zoom interview with with a writer. I mean, I always like to ask, because once I ask and understand where they're coming from, I can adjust. So if I ask that and they said, let's say they don't seem to know a lot about the topic, right? It's general. Then I'm like, okay, they're trying to do some like discovery, some fact finding. So I'm gonna be able to give them points that's gonna help kind of like steer them in the right direction, because I know they need me to give them more direction. But if I ask them about their story, and let's say they've got a very specific approach to the story, it's like, okay, they've got their angle. They need me to clarify. Like, okay, is there something they don't understand? They need me to support. Okay, they're looking for a quote that needs me to support their thesis. They need me to refute. They're looking for the opposite point of view. So when you ask, you can understand what they want if you listen, and then you can start to give them information in the format that will support what they want, but also supports your goals in conveying information. That's number one. Number two is help the reporter. And again, these are all reasons for or ways to take more control of an interview. Help the reporter think about how to organize their story. So one of your goals is not just to impart information, it's to help them process it in a way that leads to the conclusion that you're trying to communicate. So if they're asking you a bunch of questions, and let's say, for instance, at PR Hacker, we have a bunch of cybersecurity clients. So they're asking a bunch of cybersecurity questions. You might say, you know what? Actually, in thinking about cybersecurity, I would actually break it down into two pieces. There's like threat identification, and then there's threat response. And when we look at threat identification, so what you've just done there is you said, okay, you've helped them organize it. Like, there should be two sides of your story: identification and response. Now let's go talk about identification. Now let's go talk about response. So you've given them a framework to think about it. And as you start helping them organize and give frameworks, you're able to take more control of that eventual story outcome. Number three, offer to be available for last-minute quotes or fact checks. So one of the things that happens, and I know this from a journalist, is that sometimes you just need information and you need it right away. And so the more you can be available, then you can be, once they've fully formulated their ideas, that extra quote, that extra fact check, that extra go-to resource. So that helps you steer the conversation and steer where the story goes. And finally, 4, suggest news pegs and new angles for future stories. So your job in an interview is not only to do your best with the story at hand, it's to start seeding things and suggesting things for future stories. And so what actually happens is when you do that, when you start talking about, oh, this would be an interesting topic that you could go into more. Oh, this is something worth exploring. Then you become the primary source for that because you suggested it. And so that helps you influence that direction, and how you frame that story starts to lead to how that story will be covered. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate, ask the reporter up front about their intended angle for the story. If they don't have one, you can help them get one. Help the organizer, number 2, think about how to organize the story. 3, be available for last-minute quotes or fact checks. And finally, 4, always be thinking about suggesting the news story, right? And that helps you more take control. So what have we done so far? We've talked about your 4 answers, right? You can do your data point, or you can do your anecdote, or you can do your prediction, or you can do your analysis. We've talked about how to take control of the interview by helping reporters organize information, delivering it in a way that helps them steer things in a different direction while also being useful. Now let's talk about how to increase your clarity and quotability. So, and yes, Jackson, do we have a question?
We do. I think that as you're kind of diving into sort of the tactical portion of the training, this is a good one to address. We had this question from Maggie, who says that she's had instances of trainees who've done a fantastic job with key messages during training sessions, and they've role played and found that the trainees are able to consistently deliver in a controlled environment on key messages. But as soon as they're in a live interview, they lose focus and backslide into old habits. I'm sure this is something you're going to address. And one of the things we talked about a bit in the chat is the idea of focusing more on objectives and tactics than on memorized statements. But I'd be interested to get some of your thoughts as well. And then the other thing that I'll throw out here that may be something to talk about a little bit further down the line in the presentation, and even potentially in some different webinars that we've done. Deborah asks if we have any tips for data desert clients, which is say clients who have no own data of their own. And Deborah, I would refer you to on our YouTube channel, we did a recent webinar on the new rules of market research. But if you have any additional insights that are relevant to today's topic, then I'll leave that to you as well.
Okay, sure. Let me hit a couple of those questions quickly. I think number one, in terms of the question about sort of clients like doing great in media training or a sample interview and then kind of resorting to old habits or kind of losing the talking point. I mean, I think a couple of things. I think number one, to make this really kind of natural and comfortable, you need way more opportunities to output than input. What I mean by that is output is just like doing it a lot. So if you don't want them to do it a lot in a live setting, you got to have some ability to do it a lot in a kind of practice setting. And usually in those practice settings, what we try to do, and we usually do with our clients, like, one-on-one, our team becomes the journalist. We ask them questions. We record the whole thing. We got to try to amp up pressure. We try to make it feel like an interview, like, hey, welcome to, KGO TV. I'm your host, Ben Kaplan. Like we role play it out and do all of that to, one, start to give them a little bit of feel and a little bit of pressure. But two, we also try to trip them up with questions a little bit, just a little bit. Because we're trying to build confidence at the same time. So we're not trying to, drop a 500-pound weight on them, but we're trying to give them some stuff, especially at the end of that practice interview that they don't expect. We're trying to disrupt their flow, give them something they haven't practiced. And if they can output that more, that really helps. Second thing that just becomes a big problem, I think Jackson alluded to it, is we really don't believe in memorizing talking points. The problem is when people memorize talking points, they tend to do it in a chronological way, in a certain flow and order. And the minute they get interrupted, it gets disrupted. So what we prefer is for them to re-explain it new, fresh every time, because other factors will cause less disruption. So that's two quick things, but I'm going to give you some more strategies a little bit later. As for the point about the data desert and just having other ways, there's a lot of things you can actually do with market research to get data quickly and make it ownable in a very simple way. So for instance, our team, and by the way, for those of you who are PR folks, feel free to message me or message Jackson. I mean, we are the data agency for a ton of other PR firms. So we can help supply the data for you. But here's one quick strategy. We will use Google Trends all the time in different ways to look at what are people searching for, in what quantities, comparing terms, breaking down geographies of that to create data using something that's a free, publicly available source. We'll use other things and other APIs, we'll use, Indeed.com's API to look at, different trends related to certain types of skills, whether they're up or down, or certain types of jobs, or things as a leading indicator of the economy. So one of the first things we do is we go into other sources where we can use it and we acquire data that way, particularly if we don't have budget to do a survey or something else. And then in addition to that, we usually make one ownable piece on top of it for them, even if it's 1% of our whole data set, to make it unique to them. So if we're using someone else's data, one, we don't like to use one source, we'll use multiple, because then that makes it even more ownable because we're combining it together. But then two, if we can add one little piece, one little bit they have on top of it, suddenly that's unique, that's ours. So that's kind of the quick answer there. So let me jump back in. How to increase clarity and quotability. Specifically, I'm going to give you kind of some named strategies and this is part of your toolkit that you can use or you could train. So one strategy is the counter. What the counter is we're going to count things out to be more clear and more quotable. So the counter is, okay, I've got 3 ways to royally screw up a media interview. Number 1, right? Number 2, number 3. So the first way to add sort of clarity and quotability is you do the counter. You start giving basically road directions for what you're about to say by numbering things, by counting things. That's one approach. Second approach for clarity and quotability is you do the myth buster. So the myth buster says, okay, let's add some surprise to our answer. So most people think X, but the truth is actually Y, right? So now we're exposing a myth, we're busting that myth, and that's a pattern that people recognize, and that increases like, oh, that's interesting. What we're generally trying to do is make our answers more simple, more surprising, and more significant. The myth buster is all about surprise. Number 3, the shocker. So this is our way to increase quotability and clarity, is you set it up by the prelude to what you're about to say. So you don't just say your data point, you say, did you know that 72% of all statistics are entirely made up, right? A little joke, but you set it up. Can you believe that? And so you set up, that's the shocker. Or let's do the kicker. So the kicker to increase quotability, you might say, the key point everyone misses is. If there's one takeaway to remember, it's this. So those are all things that also kind of sets up the statement, shows importance. The reason this helps is this helps both in broadcast and print and everything in between. Because in broadcast, what it does is it says, everyone, host, journalist, audience, pay attention, right? This is what I'm about to say if you're doing the kicker. Or if you're doing the myth buster, it sort of says, hey, you think this, but wait, it's over here. Or some other version of that. But if you're doing print interviews too, you're actually cluing in the reporter on what they should take notes on. What's the quote, right? If you come in and say, if there's one takeaway to remember, this is it, then I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist, I'm like, okay, oh, what is that? I'm gonna lean in and listen to that. I'm probably gonna write it down, right? So these are all things you can do and just how you phrase things that allow you to impart that clarity and quotability. And so brings us to how to present your best self. We're going to talk a lot about sort of the basics of what you need to know for a Zoom interview or a Skype interview or a Microsoft Teams interview or a Cisco WebEx interview, remote, but then also what you need to know if you're doing this, eventually soon, hopefully in a physical setting, if you're doing this over the phone, how do you do this? So what I would say, and this is to reiterate my earlier point, that all of these remote video tools have such power for media interviews that now suddenly we can do like a 20-country global tour from home. And so if you're not learning how to maximize this, you really should for yourself and your clients. So point number 1, and sort of how to teach people to kind of manage their best self. Frame the shot intending to either include or exclude your hands. Now I've got a little bit of a depth thing here because of just how the room's set up. But usually for a media interview, I would either be, okay, I'm either going to be right here and I'm not going to use my hands at all. Or I'm going to come back here, try to come back as my hand. I'm going to be framed back. It's a little bit high. Let me lower this down. If you're going to see me, because hands are super expressive. And it depends. And where people kind of get caught is this sort of like in between, where I'm like kind of here, but then like I got hands coming up here. So I either got to like I'm not going to do hands, or I'm going to do hands. And that often will depend on too the comfort of the person. A more sort of kinetic learner and thinker will want to move. They're going to want to move their body. It helps to give them a little more freedom. And it's awful if you're like this and you got like stuff coming up like that. It really doesn't look good. So you kind of make that adjustment. But you just gotta, doesn't matter, no right answer, but you gotta commit one way to the other. If I am in a close-up situation and I talk a lot with my hands, then you'll see me, a little trick, I'll sit on my hands. So I won't use them, okay? So that's number 1, just basics and framing. Number 2, so set up a front light source and avoid lighting sources behind you. This is the street out here. If I start opening this, it's gonna cause all kinds of problems right there. So I'm gonna close that back up. And generally what you want is a light source in front of you. So what happens is in this hotel room, there's windows over there. So I knew that was a light here. So I actually just like moved the standing lamp in the room right over here. So I have a light here and here, let me show you this. If I turn off this lamp, which is right here. Okay, that is just from the outside there. And I just took this fill light and just did that right there just to look a little bit more put together for the webinar. And then this is not my normal space. So generally, simple lighting rule to teach, avoid light behind you, set up front lights, a light in front of you. And generally, if you have light coming on one side, then you're going to have a shadow on this side. You stick another light on the other side. Just very basics of lighting that you can teach your clients or teach yourself or your CEO. Number 3, remove shine from your face and hide any reflective objects. So if there's basics of that, it's just like, don't be shiny. Particularly for video and TV. And if you're shiny or if there's perspiration, that kind of, you're right, perspiration is associated with being uncomfortable, right? So, and if you're uncomfortable, you're a little bit less trustworthy, right? Or believable. So generally you're removing shine and any shiny objects. What that means is there's a ton of things in Zoom, like people are in their like home office or study and there's like, you know, their award behind them or their diploma or something that's framed. Those are all reflective objects you generally want to avoid. One quick little tip, if I'm wearing glasses and these glasses are here, these glasses are treated to be non-reflective. It's a simple coating. It usually costs, I think, like an extra 25 or 50 bucks. And anyone who's on TV has them if you're using glasses. So that's a simple thing you can do there. And then I'm not an expert on makeup at all, at all. There are people, but I kind of know the basics of this. And this is my recommendation for sort of anyone, and particularly, you know, guys that aren't familiar. One, you know, lighting's more important than makeup. So get the lighting right. Number 1, makes more of a difference. 2, if there's just basic things that sort of I know when I go on TV a lot and I impart to my clients, it's just like, 1, know that there's something called powder. Powder just like removes shine. If there's one thing to know, it's that. Use a little bit and make sure you don't look white. And then 2, if there's anything you're going to do beyond that, particularly for and sort of women who know makeup well, I'm not giving you advice on this. Do what you know how to do. But if you're just doing it for people who don't know, or like typically men are not familiar and just want to make them look a little better, then the second thing would be foundation. And just like a foundation that roughly matches the skin tone, all it really does for the points of view of TV is just kind of smooth everything else. So if there's one thing, it's get the lighting right. That's more important. 2 things, okay, maybe a little powder just not to shine. 3 things, maybe a little bit of foundation just to like smooth out some of the unevenness. And then particularly for someone who doesn't normally wear makeup, you're good to go. Okay. And then finally, avoid small patterns. So avoid small patterns that create unintended visual effects. You'll see, I mean, a lot of solid colors are great, but like paisley patterns on ties, anything that would create in video, what's called a moire effect, you want to avoid, right? So just like, and for guys, one kind of look I like a lot if I was doing TV interviews, like if you're gonna have the dark jacket, usually I try to do something like, even particularly you might not need a tie these days, just something colorful inside, make it pop a little bit more. And generally you're trying to avoid like kind of all black on black or all super white and have a little bit more contrast. So Jackson, do we have a question before we get into kind of like the differences between TV and print real quickly here?
Absolutely. This is actually one that I know we've talked a lot about, Ben, internally, and that's audio. Do you have any audio tips?
Sure. I think one thing I think that is important for just audio and presentations overall is actually, 1, making sure in the room there's not a lot of things that sound reflect off of. So if you're in a room and it's like all hardwood floors or cement floors and the walls all hard, you don't have coverings like this behind you and stuff like that, it's gonna echo and it's gonna sound boomy. So the number 1 thing like that, particularly if you're not on TV, and I've had to do this before, and like sometimes in hotel rooms and stuff like that, I'll try to just put blankets and stuff around where the microphone is. I even put like towels over my head and then put it there just to reduce that. So that's number 1. 2, being close enough to the microphone but without sort of popping your P's is number 2. And 3, if you can do a little bit of a separate USB microphone or something like that you can carry with you, a little portable one, that's not bad. But actually, I'm doing this right off of I do have one. I didn't have time to set it up today, off of my my MacBook Pro, and it's fine. The microphones have gotten pretty good. So I would just say that, but mostly what will impact things is just having like a lot of like kind of fabrics around you that will absorb sound, so sound doesn't get reflected. That's great for audio. Let me jump in and talk about strategies for TV and then strategies for print online. Strategies for TV. Typical format that we prep people for is 2 to 4 minutes for live interviews, maybe 30 to 60 seconds that you're going to get for edited tape segments, and a few things that we do. So 1, confirm the segment length and content right before the interview in case it has changed. What happens in especially live TV is that it's an ebb and a flow of what's going on. Maybe the segment before you went long, and so they said you're gonna have 5 minutes, and now you have a minute and a half. Or maybe the guest that came after you got canceled, you thought you had a minute and a half, and they're gonna stretch it to 7. If you know what's going on with the show, you can adjust. So if I come into a live TV interview and I know I have a minute and a half, I'm not going to use up all my time on stuff that isn't important. I'm going to be very, very conscious of that and try to get more soundbitey. If I have a little bit longer time, maybe there's room to tell a story or ask the host a question. So that's number 1. Number 2 is sequence key sound bites to summarize your main points. So you should be able to, for TV, to be able to go soundbite A to soundbite B to soundbite C, string them together in a sequence that makes sense. And if you had to do the whole interview doing that, you could do it. So have your sound bites, but also have a soundbite flow with segues, depending on where this goes. If you get in an interview and you're like, yeah, the interviewer doesn't actually know much about my topic, they're going to let me direct this, then you can flow between your sound bites. And then third, biggest tip for tough questions is avoid rambling answers. One of the huge mistakes I see a lot of people do when they're just inexperienced is they get a tough question. They get a question they don't know, and they just use up all their time grasping, trying to answer this question, right? Because it's hard, you don't know. Instead of trying to be sort of concise to address it and acknowledge it and then pivot to something you want to talk about. So biggest mistake for TV, using up your 2 minutes on something that wasn't even your intention because you didn't know and you were grasping for things, right? Now, let's flip it to the other side, strategies for print and online. So that was just about broadcast, and I didn't have time today to go into radio, but there's a lot of things you do with radio where we try to add more interactivity with the host when you have longer form radio. So we're not gonna do that today, but I wanna talk about how to get quoted how you want in print and online. First thing is make it easier for the reporter to take good notes. So that means that if I'm explaining something that's important they get it right, and it's like an acronym, I'm gonna spell it out. If it's a word and a bit of jargon where they may not know what it is, I'm gonna explain it. If there's something that I think, our catchy new name for our new product line, and I don't think they might not know how to spell it, I'm gonna spell it for them. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make it easy so they get it right. And when they see me spell it or explain something, then they're gonna realize that, oh, it must be important that I know how to spell this. And so they're gonna pay attention to it. So I use it to shape what they pay attention to. Number 2, great way for print and online to get quoted is to slow down your spoken cadence when you want to be quoted. Why? Because it tells someone what's important, number 1, and 2, it actually not only tells them what you want to be quoted, it gives them an opportunity to actually write it down, right? So if I'm talking to you and I'm telling you all about the keys of media training, and then I'm really emphasizing that you've got to impart value in a media interview, not just explain your agenda. The act of me slowing down and saying that said, it's important. I'm telling you about this, about imparting value. And 2, I actually gave you a moment to write it down, right? So use your tempo, use your cadence. And if you want to be quoted, use your tempo strategically. Brings us to number 3. Prepare a response to anything I should have asked as the ending question. A lot of print online reporters, we were trained like this. When I took journalism class, I was trained to do this. We'll ask at the end, is there anything I didn't cover that we should have covered? Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't ask? So that's your time to shape this interview and focus. 1, you can focus on what you want. And 2, even if you don't have anything, prepare something to have. Re-emphasize your main point, because this is usually the end of the interview. The last thing, this is your last chance to put in their memory what you want them to write about. So always prepare to answer that. And that brings us to a quick sample of a couple of interview samples I want to give, and then I want to end with sort of how to respond to tough questions and the final thoughts of the day. Jackson, is there anything else you want to add before we get into these questions? Ryan, I can already see is firing up the video. Is there anything else you want to mention? And I know we're running a little short on time, so I'm gonna move through these a little bit fast.
One last question. This one's a little bit more technical, Ben. I know that sometimes you will shoot on your DSLR camera with a Rode mic. And I'm not sure if you know the answer to this off the top of your head, but Brittany Guy was wondering what camera it is you use for your interviews where production quality is a very high priority.
Sure. And I'm trying to remember what it is. I actually, I can look up what I have, but I actually use a little like kind of like Sony that actually travels with me. It goes in my check-in luggage. It has a little converter that allows me to go direct into my computer live, so I can use it as an alternate camera for like a Zoom interview. So I'll set that up. I've got a little tripod that fits in a carry-on bag. It like compresses about, I don't know, about like this, and I'll expand it. And I actually have 2 LED lights that go with me too, that kind of like plug in. And so that's it. It's a little kind of like kind of Sony DSLR camera, but this particular one, basically what you need is it can use an external output, so I can have a separate audio recording if I want to do it. So I carry actually, I don't use it a ton because it just requires too much setup time, but I actually carry with me a little Zoom recorder. So if I wanted to record audio and video and then have amazing folks like Ryan Freeland, who's helping manage this webinar, sync them up, I can do it. I'll look up the specific model, but I actually keep a little like kind of Sony DSLR and then have a little converter that lets it go into my computer. So Ryan, let's queue up 2 interviews just to end up, and people, I know we started a little bit late, but like I promise I won't keep you more than another 5 minutes, but I just want you to see 2 examples. One of a really bad interview and one of a really good interview. Ryan, for fun, can we start with the really kind of, well, not as good interview as we had hoped with a certain actress model, and then we'll kind of talk about that for a second, and then we'll do a counter example. I'm going to stop my share, and can you cue that up, Ryan?
No, I don't know where that comes from. No, I think it's not easier to focus. I mean, I love what I do. It's not crazy. I mean, it's my passion, all of these things. I've wanted to do this since I was young, so it's not too hard.
Not too hard? All right.
Yeah. What do you like about Margot?
I'm living my dream.
Specifically, do you have anything in common with her?
No, I actually hate her. Yeah, I mean, of course, we have a lot in common. We connected because I think a lot of the script, I'd read some of the lines and I'd said them before, and weird coincidences like that. But again, I watched the film, and if it was me, if I was actually Margot, the whole movie would be different. So,
really?
we're different as well.
Hey, I want to jump in here. First of all, I love the movie. I love the author. I know I'm out of the demo, but I still really dig this movie. This is the teenager I always wanted to be because they're eloquent. They speak like middle-aged screenwriters rather than the awkward, dopey adolescent that I was. So I love it. Now, with that said, I saw you in London talking a couple weeks ago on TV, and you seemed a lot more excited about it than you do right now. Are you just exhausted?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm still very excited. The premiere was last night. It was an emotional night. It felt like the end of an era, but I'm not any less excited than I was a couple of weeks ago. Maybe I had a bit more energy. It's the morning.
You do seem a bit irritated. Perhaps it's just us.
No, I think it's just you.
I think it probably is us.
Yeah.
Well, then on that note,
We figured as much. We'll
let you go then. How about that? We'll let you go take a little nap.
Ryan, let's wrap up the debate there. So, question is for the group, and I don't know if you would put in the chat. What did you notice about that interview? Just in the chat, like what was her demeanor? What was like why? It kind of went south pretty fast. Like I was pretty hostile for it's just about a movie and it's like a morning show. Like what happened there? Like Jackson, any thoughts? What do you get from like she's kind of a famous model actually. I can never pronounce her last name. Cara Divinia. I don't know. Something.
Yeah.
She's famous, right? And by the way, I saw that movie. I think on Netflix. It was good. It was she was good in it. But what was her whole like language and body and just everything from that interview?
Yeah, she's a great actress, but I'm not sure that carried through to her performance in the interview. It seemed pretty transparent that she was not enthusiastic about being there. And Marie says she didn't want to be there, and it looks like from the chat, it's pretty. Most everyone agrees. Not a great interview. Ali, by the way, is coming to our rescue on pronunciation. Delevingne.
Delevingne. Okay, Delevingne. Thank you. Is it Cara or Cara? Cara Delevingne? I don't know. Okay, so basically, the point I want to make is that everything from the content. And actually, if you actually go back and look at the transcript of content, she actually didn't say anything horrible. She actually just said like, no, I'm actually excited for the interview. Yes, it's a passion of mine. She said actually the right things, that if you were doing a media training with her, like she hit her talking points, but everything was delivered with a tone. And there's two parts of this, the content and the tone. But because everything has an eye roll, an eyebrow raise, a snarky, mention, all of those things, they added up. And this is, by the way, we've placed a lot of clients on this show. They think this is like as easy as it gets for doing an interview. So the point is that it's not just content, but tone really matters. If we had more time, I'd show you a ton of stuff about like CEOs managing crises, like, a railroad CEO that just had an accident on his rail and people were killed. And the content is okay, but the tone is wrong. No matter what you say, talking points wise, you can't get past the tone. That's number one. So now let's look at a different example, totally different genre. I want to give you a business example of a different kind of interview. And let's look at John Legere, CEO, a former CEO until recently of T-Mobile. Ryan, can we run that tape?
To T-Mobile's policies. Why don't you tell the folks at home?
Yeah, morning, David. Listen, I'm having a hard time. They've seatbelted me into this chair. I don't do uncarrier moves sitting down, but for you, I'm going to try. Uncarrier move time is my favorite time of all, because just to remind you, this is a philosophical, principle-based attack on changing a stupid, broken, arrogant industry. And I made this statement 2 years ago, and everything you've outlined, these are structural changes. They're not programs, they're permanent. And today is Uncarrier 8. And I'll give you the tagline, and then I'll tell you why it is arguably the biggest thing we've ever done since Uncarrier 1. And it's called Data Stash. And the tagline is, it's your data. What you don't use, you won't lose. And in effect, you can think of it as data rollover. And the magnitude of this issue, David, is unbelievable. This game is rigged by the big guys. They get you multiple ways. And let me just give you some stats that'll blow your mind. There are 231 million post-paid customers in the wireless industry. Post-paid being they're not prepaid, is you have a bill. You're what's called the coveted customers in the industry. 231 million. Of those, there are 110 million that either have feature phones, so not a smartphone, so you don't really care about data, or you have an unlimited plan, thanks mostly to us and to Sprint, who offer those plans. That leaves 120 million what I call data guessers. 90% of the people say they have no idea how much data they need. 50% say they don't know how much they use. Of that 120 million, 13 million pay penalties. As soon as you start using, you get those warning.
Right, you get texts that say you have 50% left.
$1.5 billion last year went to penalties. So what happens? I know you can't swear on this station, but it scares the shit out of people. They are petrified. So what do? They buy up. Okay, here's the gig. People buy on average 4 to 5 gigabits worth of data. Okay, here's the amazing part. At the end of the month, on average, they have 3 gigs unused, okay? 3 gigs unused. Average cost of a data gigabit is almost $12.
You mean gigabyte, right?
Gigabyte. Okay. Well done, my
David
friend.
Pogue, Yahoo.
Correcting John. So $12, okay? Yeah. That's about $40 a month per person, $480 a year, 100 million people round numbers, $50 billion, because guess what? At the end of the month, carriers take it off the table. You go to a restaurant, you don't eat your food fast enough. They take it. You go to a gas station, you fill your car at the end of the month, you don't use the gas, they take it. What we're now allowing you to do is roll it over, and you get a data stash. And what you can do, you can put it in the bank.
Here come the props.
Okay. Last piece. You know what we're going to do to start this off?
Actually, let's let him finish this little part, and then we'll kind of analyze it real quick.
Every single qualifying customer and every new customer, 10 gigs free. We're going to put 10 gigs data stash right in the bank to get you going, and I think this is going to be something that's really going to shake up the industry.
So, what did we see there? What did we kind of notice from that? And aside from he's doing math on the air, there's a lot of numbers, and maybe you didn't follow any of that. Maybe it's even beside the point that you had to follow any of that. But what did you notice? the first thing from the moment he came on, and he's talking about it, he's talking about being strapped in his chair, and just how does he look? What is his demeanor? What is the tone, Jackson?
Yeah, absolutely. The passion comes through. I think that's coming out in the chat. He's really leading. There's a little bit of a sort of contrary opinion from Ali, who says he's using too many numbers, makes it hard to follow. I take your point, Ali. I wonder, and you alluded to this, Ben, if it's maybe less about those numbers landing, right? I don't know those numbers are going to stick with the audience, but I think what's important is that he's making a case that's backed by data, and that leaves a certain impression. But what I do,
here's a couple examples. He comes out, he's got a big smile on his face, right? He's talking about your carrier mobile plan. Who is jolly and joyful talking about their carrier? One, he's like got this demeanor, and he's like the CEO. So for the minute, he's got that. Now he's doing a few things to show he's confident and comfortable, but he's sort of, in explained terms, he's taking you through this math. He doesn't care if you follow the math example, but it's getting to the kicker that all this money is being wasted, and all of these cell phone companies are making money off you, and he's got a better way. And here's the better way. And he's even saying, yeah, this is going to be like, a crazy change. This is like, right, he's doing all the things like the kicker, right, that we talked about in the thing. He's doing a lot of kickers. He's doing a lot of sort of setup of things. So he comes across, even though a little bit long-winded, the example, yeah, if we were coaching him, we'd probably get him to like shorten that a bit and get through the numbers faster. But he's got this joyful persona. You're getting this impression that like, yeah, T-Mobile's out for you. If the CEO is all this, the other guys are bad. He does a little nod to a competitor, which shows he's fair, right? He says, it's just us and Sprint. So he's willing to mention them. And then he puts it in a package with a kicker at the end. And he's even confident enough when David Pogue, the journalist, corrects him because he said something wrong. He's like, look at you got it there. And he knew that. So in my opinion, it's a real effective interview. Should it be shorter and tighter? Yes. Could we have coached him to make the example? Yes. But it also portrays something which is a bigger, you don't have to follow any of the numbers. And they're like, oh, this T-Mobile thing is different, number one. And they're like on my side somehow when the others aren't.
I wonder, Ben, if this is a great example of someone who's like a natural in the interview, right? Someone who has all the raw talent, obviously talks about this all day, obviously is very good, and is maybe a prime example of how even someone who really knows their stuff, is very comfortable on camera, is very comfortable in an interview setting, could still use a little bit of coaching to make things a little cleaner, but has kind of all of the raw talent, all of the knowledge, and could maybe use a little bit of training just to put the fine polish on it.
I think so, but also I would say that we can make a lot of people through effective media training like this, because what he's doing is, what are the raw pieces? He's like doing a stat to kind of open you up. He's taking you through examples or anecdotes. He's imparting a sort of a sense of tone or a feeling, and he's being likable and believable as he's doing that. And I would argue that we can coach people to do that. Yes, he seems like a natural communicator, but actually I've seen people go from really like, wow, you'd be embarrassed about the interview, to seeming really natural simply in how we coach. So let me take it home with kind of the final sort of thoughts of the day and wrap up. And thank you for sticking with me a little bit longer here. And that is, I want to kind of talk about how to handle tough or surprising questions. So in terms of 5 types of interview tone, we can see it. There's either, is it an investigative interview? They're probing. Is it an enlightening interview? They're trying to like open your eyes to things. Is it inspiring? They're trying to like elevate the feeling, the mood. Is it entertaining? Is it meant to be kind of fun? Or is it combative? Boy, it's antagonistic. So one of the things you can do right away is identify the interview tone. And if there's one thing you can do to make an interview easier, is that unless the interview takes a negative turn, a good rule of thumb is generally to match the tone of the interviewer. So the more fun they are, you're going to be a little bit more relaxed and fun. The more like number hard hitting they are, you're going to adjust that way. So if there's one rule of thumb, it's match and mirror tone. Now, when you do that, sometimes you get in situations you want to get out of. So here's what to do in special circumstances. So one, there's a circumstance where you just need to buy more time. You just need to think about things. You got to ask the difficult question. So what is my go-to recipe for that? Well, you might go with like, that's a great question. John, Bob, Mary, right? So one, always can help build rapport to complement the question, and that buys you a little time, and usually like to say their name. Second, I think you've highlighted something really important here, right? So one, if you need time to think, buy more time. You can kind of train these phrases to be very natural. Number two, what if you don't know the answer? So if you don't know the answer to something, you just need to like acknowledge it. You can't ignore it. That's the part that like annoys people about politicians, right? It's like they ask something and then they just answer something totally different. So you've got to acknowledge it, but then you've got to pivot. So you might say, well, I don't have the definitive answer on that, but here's what I do know is, and I actually love that phrase, like definitive answer or something specific. It's like, maybe you have a whole bunch of answers, hundreds of answers, but not the definitive one. You might not have any answer at all, right? You don't have the definitive one, but what I do know. So you acknowledge and then you pivot. What if you want to avoid the topic? It's just not something you should be talking about. Or you got to coach people like, this is a legal issue, you can't talk about it. Well, some way to actually shift it from, it's not your area at all. It's not you don't want to answer. So, well, it's not usually an area I focus on my work, but what I really do is emphasize in my work this, right? So you actually avoid the topic. Finally, you want to avoid this, but if you just like need to end the interview, how do you do it gracefully? You just say like, hey, and particularly it's a little tougher if it's live TV, but if it's not live TV, you can say like, I've got, hey, I've got a hard stop coming up, but if there's other questions, I'm happy to set up another time. Or I'm sorry to do this to you. I've got a critical meeting starting right now, but if there are other questions, my email is. And so what this allows you to do is if it's a really tough interview, you just don't know, you can actually pivot to something where you can think about it, you can strategize with the team, you can write something out more carefully. So you just do that in a nice way so you can get out of that because you have like kind of a hard stop, and that's a graceful way to get out of it. So final closing insights of the day, a few things. What have we learned today? And let me kind of go back. I'll go back kind of all the way to the top here. Actually, if we can, zoom's a little bit slow here. I'm going back up. But the big point that we learned is the first thing you have to do is you have to put yourself in the shoes of the journalist. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the journalist, what we learned is they don't have much time. They have a lot of needs. They want things now in a format they like it. And so if you give them what they want in the format they want, you get to steer the conversation. We talked about mastering interview techniques. We talked about everything from how do you help them organize their thoughts and how they approach the story to get more control of the story. We talked about doing things like on print and online, adjusting your tempo to add emphasis, or on TV, being able to string your sound bites together. We talked about having, front lights here, no lights in the back, maybe a little bit less shine. Am I using hands? Am I not using hands? We did all of that. And we talked about the importance of tone and content. We gave you two examples. One of someone who just, even though her content was actually probably fine, the tone was so bad that it detracted. And someone else on T-Mobile CEO who was hardcore selling you his product and yet you enjoyed it, right? Yet it was actually engaging, even though he was like straight in salesman mode, but it was okay. It wasn't a turnoff. So the tone matters a lot. And remember those B's about being likable, being believable, being credible. All of those things are important. And then finally, with tough questions, you can answer any question, but the key is to not use up time where you don't want to use it and to shift your focus to where you do want to talk about, but never ignore the question. Acknowledge it and then move on. So where does this leave us? If you want to be on TV, if you need to be on in print interviews and newspaper interviews, this can all be taught. This is a trained skill. And the key is don't try to be like, the next, I don't know if it's John Ledger for T-Mobile or if it's someone else overnight. You don't have to be. Instead, try to output a lot, do a lot of examples to practice. I recommend this for PR people. If people need practice, put them in live interviews, but make them smaller interviews first, right? So they can get used to it. And try to make yourself 5% better, 7% more clear, 9% more quotable. And this is like compound interest that adds up over time. Second, maybe you're a trainer. Where does this leave if you're a publicist, if you're a PR person, if you're a trainer, if you're someone that needs to train people in your company? The key with this is that build people up, make them feel good, but be constructive in your criticism with no more than 3 things they can take away and work on. It doesn't help to really give them 12. if they need to focus on 3 things. So no more than 3. It's kind of what the human brain can process. Focus on 3 things and focus on that incremental improvement. And if you do this, and if you take this approach, and if you have faith in folks, I have seen huge transformations. It's not about making someone into a person or a talker that they are not. It's about helping them find their own voice. And if you can do that for them, if you can do that for yourself, that is a fantastic gift. It impacts you your whole life. You'll be a more effective communicator. You'll do great on media, and this will impact your entire career. So with that being said, thank you all for coming. This is Media Training Masterclass. Thank you, Jackson, for hosting this today. Are there any final questions and thoughts, Jackson? Otherwise, let's call it a day, and thank everyone for coming.
One last question just coming from Steve, and before we get into it, because I know folks need to take off, contact information for Ben is in the chat. You can get today's slides at the link provided. You can also get this and other webinars in full on our YouTube channel. You can connect with Ben on LinkedIn. He doesn't accept every LinkedIn request, so just make sure you mention that you are a webinar attendee. You can also tweet him at Benjamin Kaplan and email ben.kaplan@prhacker.com. The final question coming in from Steve that I wanted to make sure that we addressed, and if there are any other questions, you can feel free to ask them and stick around chat. But Steve was wondering, sort of, when you're confronted with difficult questions and you're in a position where you sort of need to extract yourself from the interview, how do you do that if there was kind of already a time frame established for the interview?
I think the main thing is one, you just got to do it gracefully. So you got to find a way. So just say, so what you try to do is not do it suddenly, like they just ask you the super tough questions and say like, oh, Jackson, got to run. Oh boy, that means up. So you try to, basically it's sort of like acknowledge and pivot. But in this case, your pivot is you've got to go. Right. So if you just need to get out of it, it's like you try to do it quickly. You try to say, like, for instance, your phrase like, well, I don't really focus on that in my work. I know there's some issues there related to blah, blah, blah. And then you just have to try to gracefully get out. Now, it's a cost benefit analysis. Can you always make it graceful? Maybe not. But maybe if you just don't want to talk about it, you just need out. You just need to do it. But I think having something else urgent to do. And then the other way to make it a little bit more graceful is to actually say like, hey, actually, if you don't mind, I'm getting pinged right now. My team needs me for this. It sounds like it's urgent, but do you mind emailing me the questions? And then it says you're not shirking it. It's email, and then you can have time to think. You can decide if you want to answer it. You can forward it to legal department. You can do whatever you want. So you can do it. So I think that's sort of the skill, which is sort of like acknowledge, pivot, get it in a medium, in a format where you can think or adjust or get someone else involved. And if you have to sort of do it like something has just come up, then just be apologetic and excuse yourself. So Jackson, how'd we do?
Yeah, I think, we've I think answered every question for the chat. I don't see any new ones coming in. So I think that does it for us, Ben.
Okay, well, take care, everyone. Next week is going to be, I think we've announced it already, but next week is going to be the new rules of crisis communications. So another one from the PR genre. If you are dealing in crisis comms or you've got a hot button issue, looking forward to next week. So see y'all then. I'm Ben Kaplan, CEO of Top Global. PR Hacker is one of our agencies. You can always email me at ben.kaplan@prhacker.com. Go out there and ace those media interviews. Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.